Me.
All right, and it's 7 o'clock. Hello, everyone. I don't know if you were listening before to all that commotion. This is Alan Cohen, and I'm here with Rob Tull. And welcome to the EQ Advantage interview show. And my name, as I said, is Alan Samuel Cohen, and I'm an executive and leadership coach and an expert in emotional intelligence. And the EQ Advantage interview show, I get the privilege to interview some really fine, inspiring men who are making a difference in the world. The theme of each show is real men, real conversation, and that's what we intend to do, is to get real. And all of the programs under the EQ Advantage, group coaching programs and one-on-one coaching and training, all is anchored and rooted in the study and the practice of emotional intelligence. And really excited today. The theme of tonight's show is the path through uncertainty and stress, which is so important in these times. And we've got a great expert to talk us through. If you are joining us, please put in the comments where you're coming from, not spiritually, where are you joining us from? And if you're catching this by replay, hit hashtag replay, because we'd love to know who is joining us this evening. And Rob, welcome.
Hi.
Hello. So let me do an introduction of my pal, Rob Tull. So Rob is a success coach. He's an author and a speaker, and he's founder of Path to Coaching. He is a little too good looking for his own good, and I tease him about that constantly. He is passionate about progress and helping others find the best path for their happiness and success. He has over 20 years of experience as an executive, as a consultant, and as a thought leader in the financial services field. He understands firsthand what burnout looks like and the personal consequences that come from years of stress and postponing genuine happiness. And he's going to share with us his personal journey around that. He's a creative problem solver. He loves challenges, like figuring out how to achieve happiness and fulfillment and success without the stress and burnout that comes with it. Through experience and study, he's developed a methodology to achieve happiness and fulfillment in the near term with more passion and energy without compromising on goals and dreams. The methodology is called Path to, and several components of his methodology have been featured in 3 international best-selling books on personal betterment. He's a certified professional coach through the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, IPEC, where I also attended. It's a great program. And he has degrees in finance and business law and several professional certifications. He's an adjunct professor. He's a single father to 2 teenage sons, and he is an active member in our EQ Advantage group program and in our community, and he's just an all-around great guy. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. And so, Rob, just before we get going into the conversation, the topic tonight, give us a little color. Tell us a few things that we might not be able to glean from your bio.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a really active person. So as you can tell, I do a lot of different things, but I also like to be physically active. There's an aspect of my personality where I enjoy that kind of just breaking a sweat and really trying to problem solve things. And my preferred approach is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kickboxing. And unfortunately, since the pandemic began, a lot of that has dropped off. So when your outlet for energy tends to be combat oriented, it's kind of hard to find a safe release for that when you're not allowed to train. So, but that's something that's kind of in the background when I tell people I do that. That tends to kind of throw them off a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so you'll share with us maybe some of your tips on how you release some of that energy when you don't have all those other avenues available to you.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
So Rob, so your day-to-day job is pretty stressful. What is it that you do exactly?
So I'm the chief compliance officer for an investment firm, and I've been with them for over 10 years, and it's been part of my field for 20 years. And it's a situation where I have an opportunity to leave that, and I'm so committed and passionate about seeing things through and delivering the best that I can. It really has been a situation where I've been able to get the best of both worlds. There you go. In terms of still being able to provide for them and still pursuing the activities that I really am passionate about.
Right. Right. Has it been super stressful these past few months?
Yeah. Intense. So yeah.
Intense. And you live in Arizona,
Correct.
which is a place that's getting hard hit right now with
Yeah.
the coronavirus. I know something about that, living in New York myself. So
Yeah.
how's that going for you and your family?
It's interesting to watch it develop, because part of my responsibility for the date, for like the 9 to 5 that I have, or the 9 to 9, is really managing the COVID response for the firm. So I kind of have a global perspective. So when I pull back and kind of look at the local response, there's this lack of acceptance locally here, and you're seeing the consequences of that. And the one thing that I think is really interesting, a friend of mine had kind of pointed out cognitive biases and this idea of the Dunning-Kruger curve, and the least amount the more confident you are,
Right.
I see a lot of that firsthand, and it's pretty fascinating.
Right. Those of us who know a little too much are constantly stressed out.
Correct. Yeah.
So, the theme of these calls is real men, real conversations. But we want to kind of blow the lid off of that, of a conventional thinking about what it means to be a real man. And and I know you've got a point of view about that. So I'd love to just kick off our conversation around.
Oh, absolutely. So when you first presented the idea of real men, the first thought I had was that implies fake men. And when I think of fake men and real men, or fake boys and real boys, I think of Pinocchio.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing that came to mind, was this idea of, I want to be a real boy. And so what happens is, right, so Pinocchio gets this like hybrid where he's still not a real boy, but he wants to act and behave like a real boy, kind of like a real man. And what's he do? He gambles, he smokes, he drinks, and eventually becomes a donkey, which kind of seems like it's emblematic of a fake guy trying to be a real guy.
Donkey, also known as an ass.
As an ass, right? And so that was the first thing that triggered in that kind of silly thought. And then that kind of led a little bit to, there's this great TED talk by biologist Franz de Waal. And he talks about the study of chimpanzees, and specifically the alpha male. And he breaks it down into kind of the bully alpha male and the leader alpha male. And when he describes the two behaviors, I see it as really being indicative of what's a fake man versus a real man. And the bully is the terrorizer, the one that frightens, and the one that takes power, keeps power, and tries to affect and influence on the environment from its own internal perspective, kind of a self-centered viewpoint. Right. Whereas a leader alpha male is really interested in serving a mediator, as a consoler and a unifier of the group, and where part of his response is, what does the group need me? And so in that respect, I see that as kind of the female mentality, in that I can't impose my will on the environment. I need to be able to adjust my own internal response to whatever the environment needs. So that's how I tend to think of a real man.
Yeah, you're touching a lot on some of the emotional intelligence qualities. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, because I want to get to the meat of the conversation. But I love that. I love your take on that. So tonight's topic is the path through uncertainty and stress, and that is a great place to dive in. So I'd love to just kick off the conversation with your perspective on what there's so much going on in the world right now that we could consider uncertainty and stress, and how do you define uncertainty and stress for yourself? What's your thinking around it?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that the theme for 2020 is uncertainty and risk, right? And so in a lot of respects.
So you said risk. Do you mean risk, or do you mean stress, or do you mean both?
Stress. I'm sorry. It's all gets into the same soup, right?
Well, your day job is risk, so
It
makes
is. It
perfect
really
sense.
is. And I've got a whole school. Unfortunately, I have a school of thought on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that idea of that stress. And so really when we're thinking about uncertainty, it's that kind of, there's an external situation, an external condition that we can't control. And it's creating this unknown factor for us. And it really drives what I find a sense of fear. It's the fear of the unknown. And a lot, if I were to summarize that fear of the unknown, it's I don't know if I'm going to be okay. How is this going to affect me?
Right.
And that amplifies, like that fear gets amplified when we assume we know what's happening, or we assume what's going on, right? Hey, I had a plan for life for 2020. In my New Year's resolutions, pandemic wasn't there, nor was everything else.
Right.
So what happens is you kind of move ahead on your path on what your goals are, and all this uncertainty comes up. And that fear of the unknown really is that aspect of uncertainty that I think affects a lot of people. And that fear, if you freeze it and say, okay, well, now I can't move forward with life. Life can't continue because things are uncertain. The landscape is changing and I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to hold still. That sitting still in that unknown environment is what really creates stress. And so you kind of get like a compounding effect of the longer you hang out in uncertainty, the more stress you get. And if you wanted to just say, well, if you wanted to just challenge that thought, you would simply say, remember a time you're waiting on medical results, right? That uncertainty, the longer you wait, the more that stress goes up.
Right. So it's sort of like you're talking about the freeze,
absolutely.
the
We're in like a
fight, flight, freeze, right?
Absolutely. And so what happens is, and that's because that unknown is perceived as a threat. When we don't know if we're going to come out the back end of something, it's inherently a threat because it's unknown. And when we look at threats like fight, flight, and freeze, that freeze is really gathering information. That freeze is something is different. There's something occurring around me, and I'm feeling unsafe. And I could be unsafe physically. I could be unsafe emotionally if I'm in a relationship where now it's suddenly unknown, financially with a job. And what's amazing is we're experiencing all of that right now. It's cutting across everything.
Yeah.
And so that freeze allows us time to gather information. But what it's doing is the clock is ticking on the stress, right? The more information I gather, then I know, okay, I have two options, fight or flee. And so that's what the stress really triggers. And the amazing thing to me that I see in the current situation is, while things feel very uncertain and very stressful, by the very nature of uncertainty and stress, they are catalysts, right? So uncertainty is saying, time out, rules have changed. Everything is different now. Stress says, okay, I'm gathering information and it's going to get to a point where I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
My stress tolerance is going to hit a capacity and I've got to do something.
Right.
All of that is a catalyst. It calls for a change. And so when you look at the environment that we're in and you think, wow, this is really bleak, I see it as opportunity. I'm like, wow, the opportunities here are huge. We have this changing landscape. Nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I know my stress is through the roof. And if I just hang out and wait, I'm not going to come out well. And if I were to simplify that in an example, I'm going to put that and say, assume it's your body, right? And uncertainty is that idea of I'm not in balance anymore, right? Hey, I'm standing upright. Despite popular belief, I am a biped. So I'm up here, I get pushed, I'm uncertain, I think I'm falling, gather information. I'm at risk, what do I need to do? If I choose to do nothing, I'm going to hit the ground pretty hard.
Right.
And so the environment we're in right now, if we look around and say, I choose to do nothing, or worse, things will go back to normal. Mm-hmm. The outcome of that is almost guaranteed to be worse than I'm going to respond. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to react to the stress. Right. Now, obviously, it's not something harebrained, but it's something that's natural for what the stress is telling us to do. Right. The same way that, like, again, using your body as an example, stress causes growth. And the growth happens at the point of the stress.
Well, you see this a lot, and I know this as a coach working with business owners. They're different camps, and I've seen business owners completely stop doing anything because they're waiting for things to resolve or a perfect situation, and so in that not doing, they're not creating opportunity. They're not, and while I'm not suggesting that they go out and invest huge amounts of money and amidst uncertainty, or not really suggesting anything to them, but to not do anything doesn't seem like the optimal strategy.
Right.
And the people who have taken action, considered action, managing risk to the extent that they can, they're coming out the other side in a much more favorable way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things because we're all experiencing this stress at the same time, and because it's affecting all the pockets of our lives, we're somehow responding differently than if this was the kind of stress and uncertainty you were experiencing in your individual life. We experience this stuff all the time. And in your individual life, it's not like you would call a timeout and want everything else to stop, nor would you be afraid to continue ahead. And so, like, an example I'd use is from my own experience. Several years ago, my marriage was in the process of unraveling, and at the same time, one of my sons had to go to a crisis center for suicidal ideation. Wow. And it was regarded as high risk. And so he was sent to a treatment facility for a number of weeks. And so that's a lot of uncertainty by definition. I don't know if he's going to be okay. I don't know what I can do. It feels out of control. But if I were to simply sit there and say, I choose to clock out at this moment, that's not realistic.
Right.
I've got to be able to weather that and still continue with life. I got to go to work. I got to support him. I've got to still, and I'm in this weird situation where the marriage is kind of pulling apart. Yeah. And then you get this force that's like, well, do you get back together? What do you do?
Right.
But if I was just like, I'll revisit this when it's over, that's not practical. And so the idea that you wouldn't do that in your own personal situation. So when the idea is, hey, it's just bigger and we're all facing it, it doesn't seem realistic or pragmatic to say, well, in this opportunity, I'm just going to sit on the sidelines.
Right.
And wait until the dust settles. You couldn't do it.
Right. So what did you, going through what you went through with your son and, and that, what did you learn about yourself that actually has been helpful for you right now going through this global pandemic?
Great question. So the first thing was the impulse control to resist trying to control the external circumstance. So before, when I said the kind of the chimpanzee example, the alpha males, like the bully, and there was a time where I subscribed totally to the bully mentality because it appears to be effective on its face. When you hit things with a hammer, stuff changes.
Right.
It's not necessarily the way you want, but it's an effect, right? And so I subscribed to that for a long time. And so you put me in a situation where I don't control my son, I don't control the circumstance, I don't control anything. And you have to resist the temptation to go to that barbaric, let me just wrestle it to the ground. It doesn't work. And so I had to really do some soul searching on, what do I need to do to allow this situation to run its course and to be ready to respond when it's the right time? And so, okay, what does that look like in my head? And then it's the question of, oh, can I do that? And see, that, to me, that piece of, can I do that, is where a lot of us get stuck. Mm-hmm. So you see something and you think, God, I wish I could do that. Or I wish I was that kind of person. I have a very high self-actualization score. And so for me...
So it's just to intrude. So Rob's talking a little bit about some aspects of emotional intelligence, which are things that we work together on in our group programs. And so maybe just as you're explaining, talk a little bit about the definitions too.
Totally.
Right?
So it's that idea of, how do I improve myself? What what am I asking of myself in terms of internal growth? And internal growth, so my level of internal growth is on improving myself, right? So it's building attributes, building skills, building knowledge. A nice way to say it would be, I want to be a Renaissance person. A critical person would say, you're a perfectionist, but it's still, tomato, tomato.
Right.
So I looked at that situation and said, who is the guy I need to be that serves my son best and that can also be supportive of this entire process?
Right.
And I don't get the ability to say, nah, I'm going to stick to what I am. It's ridiculous. So what I had to do is say, I'm still me, regardless of whether or not my behaviors change. So I need to change my behaviors and approach him differently and approach the situation differently, and in order to support it. And so
were you always that guy though? I mean, or is that something that you learned by going through that situation, that you were going to need to adapt and be like be the person that was needed in that situation?
Yeah, great question. It's totally something that is a conscious choice, right? So it's not something, some of us might have it innately, but I think a lot of times it's conscious choice. And it's that natural resistance of, I wish I could make a change. And you hit that inertia of, and there's two parts to inertia, right? So part of it is, I don't know how. And then the other part of it is, I'm afraid to, because I don't know who I will be, right? That idea of, I've always been this person. If I change, I won't be me.
Right. So it's almost like a killing off of a part of you, or
absolutely,
letting go of an aspect of your ego that is attached to that kind of way of being.
Completely. So I had to go through a very difficult learning process of how to get to the point to say, you are allowed to change, and here's how to change based on what the end goal is. And see, that was really key, was getting to the point. So a lot of times change doesn't happen if you don't see where you're going or what your purpose is. And so for me, I really had to step back and say, my method of fatherhood sounded awesome on paper, and it really fit the 1950s. It did not fit now, right? So it was, make boys really hard and indestructible, and that doesn't fly. And so what happened was, I had to step back and say, that's not working. You can either continue to ride this all the way to the bottom, or you can step back and say, admit you don't know what you're doing, but be willing to change and take that change based on where I think I want to go. I want a healthy kid. I want someone that's resilient. I want someone that can live life without me. I want someone that can do all these things. Okay, now that change has more purpose behind it. So now I can get behind it and say, Rob, you're making these adjustments. You're getting out of your comfort zone, or maybe to what Zach was saying, going maybe a little bit into my comfort zone to make these changes that I know ultimately support where I want to get.
Right.
And so that piece really supports self-actualization. And it really supports the concept of, I got to be flexible with my own self-image. I have to admit when I don't know something. And I can't be governed by fear. Yeah. I have to walk in and see, that's the thing. If I had just stayed frozen, that's it. Fear wins. I get no progress and no change. The ability to say, I'm still going to move ahead, even though things are unclear, allows me to be proactive, allows me to actually implement the change I need in order to be effective.
Well, it sounds like you've become so incredibly self-aware, and you just continue to evolve yourself as you go through these life challenges, which is just such an amazing gift that you give to yourself and to your family and to your community. It seems like you're very fluid in that process of evolving.
Yeah, I try to be, and there's a conversation we can have at another time, which is called my James Bond theory, which is awesome. But the thumbnail is, you're the same character your whole life, even though each one might look and behave a little different. we understand it's the same guy and the same story. And so if you can buy into that and say, if I can believe this clown on the screen is the same guy as that other guy, I can believe that me who is compassionate is the same me that wasn't compassionate and was the bully. And I can not be afraid of change. And so
well, your essence doesn't change.
Essence doesn't change.
The core, the core doesn't change.
Correct.
So let's get a little more tactical right now. And like, so there are men listening right now, there are women listening right now, but this mainly focused on men. And how as men do we navigate through all of this stress and uncertainty right now, and come through it whole and, maybe even a little bit better, for ourselves, for our families, for our communities? What are some things that you have to recommend?
Well, I definitely think that us as men, we tend to take on a lot of responsibility. And so part of it is that problem solver, right? Hey, I need to solve this situation. There's a time when to think that, and there's a time thinking that's okay. Seeking the solution is a different process. When we say, I need to solve this, therefore I'm going to wrestle the universe and hope that it complies, is a losing game. Right. But a lot of times, if you were to look at like kind of the spectrum of how men respond, then that's at the far end. That's I'm going to do this and I'm going to move mountains and do it. The type of uncertainty we're facing and the type of stress we're facing, that's not going to result in anything positive. Yeah. And so we have to say, okay, I need to control. Well, what can I control? I can control how I'm affected by this stress. I can control whether or not I choose to see loss in uncertainty or opportunity in uncertainty. If I just sit around and say, this situation has ruined everything, I liked it the way it was, I liked it, that's not helpful. That's not a solution. That's just more problem identification. Solution is, okay, what are the things that are important to me? What are my values? Now, how do I find them? How do I follow my compass to find them in this new environment? Not how do I fix the environment? So I think a lot of that problem solver mentality, we have to put down the hammer and start to look within of, no, the solution is somewhere in here, It's not out there.
Right, so what I'm hearing you say is really that it's that we are powerless in a lot of ways to change all these outside forces, but we are completely able to change ourselves and help us better get through things.
Absolutely, and we not only do we need to accept that, we need to embrace it, and we need to be willing to let go of certain things and to say, I don't always have the answer. I don't always know best, and that's a big thing. Like oftentimes, we have this self-image that's obviously supported by an entire culture and a socioeconomic system that says like, the guy knows best. And it's like, that's bunk. We need to stop playing that game and be willing to step back and say, I don't know, but what do I know? Okay, here's what my heart's telling me. Here's what my values are. Here's what I can do that's within my power. And I have to be willing to use my choice. Because a lot of times, so uncertainty and stress are indicators that change needs to occur. And one of the things I talk about in some of my own methodology is this idea of a well-worn path. And the well-worn path is that all of us take it, everyone does it, and what you're promised is, hey, here's how it's going to pan out. It never pans out that way. So, but what happens is there's this threshold where I think, oh, maybe I should just stick with this a little longer and it'll pay off because I've subscribed to it for so long. But the reality is I'm giving up free will at that point. I'm giving up because all my sensors, uncertainty and stress is saying, move, change, do something. If I'm like, nah, I'm going to keep riding this, that I'm giving up my choice. I need to listen to my senses and say, I don't know what to do or how to do it, but I know I need to do something. So then the next question becomes, well, where were you going? Right? Oh, that's my purpose. Why was I doing all of this in the first place? Right. So now I can navigate uncertainty by going back to my purpose.
Right. And I think that that's a really good point. And I think that that's what a lot of people have lost a sense of amidst all of this swirling around. And so so your purpose doesn't need to change. Some of the strategies or some of the output may change, but we don't change our our ultimate compass and compass setting.
Right. And so often we get thrown off by the uncertainty, right? It serves like a fog, and it's almost like the universe just like blew the dust in your face. You're like, well, now I don't know where I'm going. And it's
now
like,
blow everything. Now blow everything up.
Now
right?
blow everything up. Right. And that's a big thing too. And so when you ask me about like, how do I kind of change the parts of myself, a big thing of it is I really do not support people blowing up lives.
Yeah.
I don't like, so many people get in that spot where they think, well, I've got to change something. And then it turns into like a wile E. coyote where they're just like, I'm just going to detonate everything. And it's like, well, that wasn't helpful at all.
Right.
Like, so I'm really big about the identifying what's working and what's not working. What does the situation call for? And what do I need? And then doing it kind of systematically and saying like, oh, because what happens is then you smooth the change. And next thing you know, that's that kind of like the 1% change a day where you get a little further out and you realize, well, I've covered a long distance. I'm no longer the same guy, but I don't remember, calling an end of the act and starting with something new and suddenly it's a new actor. Like it's incremental.
Right. One, you see this a lot in business and with leaders, that it's like things get hard, things get out of control, and then they just immediately burn the bridges and burn the boats and just change direction. And it can be really frustrating for people to be around that constant whirl and swirl. It's like they lose their way and they take everybody with them.
That's really emblematic of an indirect way of trying to change the environment. And that it really is. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's like, I only have the resources that I remember experiencing. There's no newness. There's no growth. So it's, let me use that old thing and do it here. And it's like, well, that doesn't take into account what the environment is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love this conversation. And I'd love to hear more about, so I know you're creating, developed a whole bunch of cool programs and things that you're launching imminently. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the PATH programs and how people get in touch with you and all that good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the programs that I'm launching in the fall is the Path 2 program. And it really takes the methodology that not only I've used on myself, but that I've spent a lot of time just refining and building, refining, and just constantly honing. And it's really about how to solve the problem we encounter, which is oftentimes we take happiness and fulfillment and put it after achieving success in certain goals. And that's what our culture does. And we always take the reward and put it at the end. But what happens is we're all doing it. And so that success line moves farther and farther out. And it's like, and so suddenly it's always like, one day I'll get happy. One day I'll be fulfilled. And so my program really decouples the two things. It takes the emotional experience you want from life away from the concrete objective and says, let's get the emotional thing solved now, because then we're going to get a lot more goals accomplished when we're already feeling the way we wish we felt all along. And so, and it works through that in a very systematic way. And it really does kind of what you were highlighting, that idea of like interchanging pieces and really focusing on the goal. And I try to maintain stability is key for me. None of us exist in a vacuum, right? We're all we play a role in a system. And so when you blow things up, the whole system is affected. I try to avoid that. But you can find me on, I have a website called Path and then the number 2 coaching, because that's where it comes from. It's the second path. That's really the emphasis, is get off the main path, get onto Path 2. And so it's path, the number 2 coaching.com. And you can find me on Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook than any of the other sites, and you can find me personally. And Path 2 also has a page as well.
I still have a bunch of questions. So do you think that there are ever times where it's okay to blow everything up?
There are times, right? There are times. So another example I'll use is, and it's a process I use for myself. It's what I call the junk drawer approach, right? So everybody has a junk drawer in their kitchen someplace, and it's filled with crap. But at some point in time, that drawer had a purpose, and you had a plan where you're like, oh, it's going to stay neat and it's organized and it's this and that. And at some point, it's just ridiculous. And so you take that drawer out and you dump it on the table. That's the blow everything up, but it's a metaphorical sense, right? So and what I use the junk drawer as a metaphor is for myself, right? So you dump the drawer out and you're like, oh, what is this attribute? What is this? Some things you remember had a purpose. Oh, I remember why I'm so stubborn, because it worked in this situation. Do I need this anymore? Yeah, keep it in or no, chuck it. And then there's things where like, I didn't even know about that. Like, I forgot it was that way. That's garbage. And then you find the things you thought were gone, where you're like, I totally forgot that I love to draw. I totally forgot. And so, and then the things that are important you put back in the drawer and you have more purpose. So the blowing it up becomes more of a metaphorical sense. And what happens is you get really deliberate about the stuff you throw out. And if you're starting to talk about like toxic relationships and stuff, when you sit down and identify it in its little mosaic piece and say, that's trash, now you can be surgical. That piece is gone. It's gone. And so, yeah, there is a bit of a blow it up, but it's a little more confined.
And I love the drawer metaphor, and I never throw anything out. I think I need to hire you to come and Marie Kondo
Dump it out.
Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. So are you doing one-on-one coaching these days, or it's mainly group and online training, or?
Right now it's more program based. And so I'm looking to do more one-on-one. To be honest with you, I haven't really found a good fit. And so I'm pretty particular in the type of people that I'm looking for, and also too, in where I'm a good value. I'm really a big proponent in educating. And so I'm very happy to educate and enlighten and guide somebody. But sometimes if they're like, hey, I need you to hop in the trench here with me and help me with the shoveling and stuff. And it's like, and it's not that I can't do that work. It's like, but do you need me? You might need somebody else. So I do. And so I am pretty particular about the people that I work with in those situations. But really, I'm all about betterment. Like in terms of if I can share the lessons learned with everybody else and spare them a lot of the suffering and a lot of the costs, a lot of the expense that it has cost me. I've lost everything. So, and there was a point in my life where I literally lost it all, and I had to decide what comes back in, and then is that even possible? So the people that I tend to work with are people who understand that kind of that they're at that point. When I talk about effectiveness, there's two things that I think are key ingredients for change to be effective: desperation and willingness. Desperation is I've already tried a number of things, but I need something that works. And willingness is I'm all in. Not I'm kind of in if it works a little bit, it's I'm all in. Those two are key ingredients for amazing transformations. And so that's when I tend to click with people the most.
Well, you're a guy who is always all in, and I can understand why you would be attracted to working with people like that as well. And so I'm going to keep you on a little bit longer because there's more stuff to talk about. So
okay,
what like when the talk show host, they'd always invite people back. You always knew that was like a good sign, keeping you on for a little longer. So what are what's a question that you wish I had asked you? Something that's just burning inside of you to share with our viewers.
Well, I think one of the questions that I always like to, or one of the things I really love to talk about, is the idea of that well-worn path and how we end up in this situation. And because we did, and especially as men, there's an archetype that we have to follow at times. And there's a lot of modeling that goes on in society. It's not short of outlining roles we need to sit in. And it's really antiquated. And so what happens is, as men, we end up in roles, and as kind of participants in society, we end up in roles. And I think that is a big problem for us. And the reason is all the institutions we pass through from the time, from when we're toddling around and we're just a mess until, we can make a decision as to what we want to do with our life. We're put through a system that basically says you are rewarded for achieving certain goals. And and what the goal is, you need to get certain grades, you need to do certain things, and then your life will be good. And if you think about it, you can almost, I can remember the times I sat down from across the table from a parent that was like, do you want to be a trash man your whole life? You need to get better grades. And so it's that kind of stuff where it's like, okay. And so you get really focused on accomplishing those goals, right? And then what happens is you start to look to mentors and you say, well, I want to be like that person. They look successful. And we start to measure success as happiness. Like it gets misidentified as happiness. But then when you talk to that mentor, they're like, I'm only so far from retirement, and then I can do what I really want to do. That to me as men, when we see that, because we're big enablers in that, we're huge enablers. And so it's that willingness to say, hang on, I'm going to pause for a second and I'm going to be that leader alpha male and say, this isn't what is in the best interest of the unit, the tribe, the group. We really need to worry about ourselves internally, because if we're happier, if we're more content, we're going to be better members in our tribe and we're going to be better role models. And so it's really that idea of that path is not something it's not a train. We're not stuck on a track.
Right.
We can pause and say, I need to go someplace else.
Right.
And
I love that. And I think that all of us need to do ourselves the service of just like slowing the F down and having a real discussion with ourselves and our maker about what is happiness for us and what is success, because we have all been indoctrinated by our families, by the media, by society, by social media, that's telling us how to define success and happiness.
Yeah.
And we all get to make that. We all get to decide that for ourselves.
Correct. And so that's one of the things that I think is really amazing too, is that the time we're in right now, it's almost like in chaos. It's almost like if you ever think of like kind of Hollywood scenarios, the time to pull off the heist is when there's chaos going around, right? So right now there's a total chaos, right? There's all this uncertainty. There's all this stress. Like if you've ever wanted to really step outside your comfort zone and really now's the time. And it sounds crazy for someone to be like, there's so much risk. And it's like, no. Risk is opportunity. Risk is only the downside of opportunity.
Right, and we're not downplaying the fact that some people are experiencing extreme hardship, and
Yes.
and may not, and the risk that they take, or they're, getting stepping outside of the stress. I mean, it may be a very small,
right, and so
window.
that's the thing, is because you feel trapped, right? You feel trapped on this path of, hey, I've been grinding this out. And that's what's expected of me. And that's what it takes to keep the certain things going. And when that's destabilized, that's an opportunity. And so we're so quick to say, I've been destabilized. I got to get back to that as quickly as possible. There's a gap. And that gap is, what do I need to be doing? Mm-hmm. What do I need to be doing for me? Right. What do I need to be doing for my family? What do I need to be doing in the circumstance? And that's where that fear of uncertainty, that stress kicks up. And it's the fight or flight, right? And so then we flee right back to the same situation. Right. At least we try to. But that's going to grind us up. We will always keep getting kicked out of that scenario until we're willing to make that choice.
Well, and I'm glad you also touched on the need for self-care right now is crucial. And it's physical self-care, it's overall well-being, it's meditation, it's creative expression, it's yoga, it's whatever you can do to just get more present, to quiet the mind. And what are you hearing, Rob?
I don't know. That was weird. Yeah.
No. Ooh.
But no, yes, right. Time travel.
Anyway,
Self-care is huge. And I think, well, so part of that, when I think about the situation that we're in, and when I think about what causes stability in life, you really have, I look at it as four pillars in life. You've got your sense of self, you have your health, your wealth, and your connections, right? And so, and oftentimes, if something is unstable in one of those pillars, life feels out of kilter. And in extreme scenarios, we experience something maybe in two areas, like a health and a wealth at the same time, or connections and health at the same time. Right now, everything is destabilized. And so there's a lot of fear. So you got to say, well, what can I control? I can control my sense of self. And that's where the self-care comes in. And it's, okay, I've got to take care of me, because that starts to reinforce stability. And now I can then focus on my health. And then wealth is going to come or it's not going to come, depending on what happens with the economy. And my connections are something I can always maintain. I lost you there for a second. I'm not hearing you for a second. Hang on. I don't know if it's something on my end. I'm assuming it is. Hang on. Let me get rid of that and see. It shows your microphone being muted.
there. Can you hear me
There
now?
it is.
Oh my goodness. I was just talking to myself and I was making Rob go through hoops.
That's fine.
I was inviting Rob to come back sometime and continue this conversation because he's
I'd love to.
some great insights, and anybody would be very fortunate to work with you in a program or to have you come speak. You're freaking awesome. Before we close out, and there may have been comments coming through. I was engrossed in this conversation, so I didn't respond. We'll go back and respond to those comments that came in. I just want to invite all the fellows who are tuning in tonight that they can interact with us at the EQ Advantage Facebook group. It's all men. Sorry, ladies, but that's where we're talking about all of these topics in greater depth and supporting each other. It's a really great community we have of solopreneurs, of men coaches, and leaders. Rob is involved in a group program that we're running right now called the EQ Advantage. We've got another cohort starting at the end of October, and so please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to know more information, or just message me on Facebook. Love to meet inspiring leaders out there. So Rob, thank you so much. This was awesome. Just one more time, tell people, give them your website address or
Yes.
contact information.
Path2 coaching.com. You reach me at rob@path2coaching.com. And on Facebook, Rob Tull. It's got, as you said, the guy's smiley news anchor image.
Rob Tull. Anyway, well, thanks everybody, and come back tomorrow. We've got another EQ Advantage interview with the amazing Henry Schoenfeld, who is an amazing spiritual coach and has some great things to share with everyone.
Yep.
Night.
Thank you, Ron.